separately over there. Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Eating at a Meeting. And I'm going to hit my go live over here on Instagram at the same time. As you can tell, I'm in my office, and I'm excited to be home for majority of September and a whole month in general. So it's great to be here. And I am excited to introduce you to my friend Alethia Erwin, who is right here. I did it correctly. She's a board member of the People's Kitchen in Philly, where she tries to do her part to fight food insecurity. Hello, my friend.
Hello, it's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And Alethia and I know each other because we're both presidents of chapters of La Dames d'Escoffier. So I'm the president of the North Carolina chapter, and she's the president of Philly chapter, Philadelphia chapter. And we just got talking on a president's call, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And then you were in Philadelphia, and we met in person, and we kind of talked about our respective work and the things that we do to try to help our communities.
Right, exactly. So I'm excited to have you on here and to talk about the People's Kitchen. So before we get started, tell me what the People's Kitchen is first, People's Kitchen Philly, and then tell me how you got involved.
Okay, so the People's Kitchen Philly is a place where we make restaurant-style meals for people in the community. We put the meals out. They are free. We don't have any requirements for people to access the meals. We also have what we call community farms, which is actually a form of urban guerrilla gardening. And what it is that in any large city, you will find empty plots of land where houses used to be. And we recultivated the land, and we're growing crops there for the neighborhood. The kitchen itself, where we prepare the meals, is in the South Philadelphia section of the city, and the urban farms are in the southwest section of the city. One of the things that happened when the pandemic occurred is it shut down on every restaurant overnight. And one of the things that the initial idea came from is for two reasons. One is there some woman, Aziza Young, who's very involved in feeding kids. And in Philadelphia, kids were guaranteed 2 meals a day at school. They got breakfast and they got lunch. And suddenly there was no school. And it highlighted the food insecurity that exists within our system. And her idea was to try to make food for those kids. And what they did is they tapped all of the restaurants that closed, and they got both volunteer workers from those restaurants and the food that they could no longer sell. So it was also a food rescue operation.
Okay.
The other person who was very involved in setting this up was Ben Miller, who had a space in South Philadelphia, which is where we operate the People's Kitchen out of now, and it was called El Compadre. So we went to El Compadre to cook. I knew Ben because my sister had done some food insecurity work with him, and she dragged me down. I tell people all the time, lots of times when you get one Erwin, there are actually 5 of us. You might end up with 5 Erwins, not necessarily doing the same thing, but doing something. And so I went down with her, and I cooked with her and another friend of ours, and we cooked in, I think it was 8-week shifts, and we did that for a while.
Wow.
And then I kind of stepped back from being involved in the kitchen, but they had someone who was doing the administrative work who left. And so then I went back to the kitchen to take a look at keeping records and seeing where we were getting our money and our food from, and trying to put it on an even keel so the people who were cooking could worry about cooking.
And I think that's a really important task because and one of my questions is where do you get the food, right? But I mean, you can get all this food in here, but you have to, if you're going to serve it and you're going to become a nonprofit, you have to have the documentation, right?
Yeah, so that was one of the things for the first at the when the kitchen was first established, we actually operated under the LLC El Compadre, doing business as the People's Kitchen,
Okay.
because you have to do all of the things to become a 501c3, and that's actually one of the things that I did. We had some consultation work from the Villanova Law Project, but when I went to look at it, I realized that because we were working with law students, whenever a student left, it was almost like we were going backwards. And then
Mm,
talk about, you get one Erwin sister, you get them all. One of my sisters had run a program out of her church. And for certain grant money, even though a church is a nonprofit, they require you to get a 501c3. And I called her up and I said, I don't understand what's going on. And she says, quit messing with those people, get the paperwork, fill it out, send it in. And I did. And we got our 501c3. And so that allowed us to, prior to that, we had gotten community grants and we got them with a fiscal sponsor.
okay.
And in lots of ways, fiscal sponsors are a good thing, because when you're a small organization, you usually don't have the financial rigor you need.
Right.
And that's what you get when you get hopefully that's what you get when you get a fiscal sponsor. We had a couple of different ones, and the requirements changed with the fiscal sponsor.
What do you mean by that?
Well, some fiscal sponsors have a whole laundry list of reporting requirements, and some of them just act as a pass. So the money comes into them, they take whatever they charge for being your fiscal sponsor, and then they forward the money to you and they give you a 1099.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's money that they're giving to you through that 1099 donation versus.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
But versus that you got it directly from a foundation, because most foundations will not give you money if you don't have a 501c3.
Right.
And sometimes even sponsorships won't.
Okay.
Which are a lot less rigorous than grant money.
Right. Yeah. Grant money takes a lot of extra paperwork, and which is a good thing. You want to make sure that it's legit, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That that nobody's taking trips to Paris.
Right. Right. Exactly. So, okay. So on that note, because in a conversation that you and I had the other day, because I was talking about food rescue, right? And food recovery, reducing food waste, et cetera. But you get your food supplies mostly from grocery stores, and I did notice on your Instagram handle today, there was a post about don't just leave it on the street for us. We need to know to track the food. So talk about that a little bit.
Okay, so we have been very lucky. We get food from several different sources, and we get them when they are. You know how they put those dates on food that says best buy sell date, which does not mean that there's anything actually wrong with the food. And so like large grocery chains, they know how people are. So for the most part, what they do is they take that food off the shelves and they donate it to us. And then the same thing happens with we get donations from Small World, which is a fish purveyor. We get donations from some of the vegetable vendors we're in the South Philadelphia, which was called the Italian Market. Now it's just called 9th Street. And so that's how we get food donations. And sometimes people bring us food donations and we're not there, or they didn't tell us they were coming, and then they leave it on the table, and then you have a whole trash issue.
Right.
And
oh wow,
and
yeah.
Some of it needs to be refrigerated. Now we have partnerships with several different organizations, and one of them is the community fridges in Philadelphia. And so they have a fridge and a pantry outside of our space where we provide the electricity for the refrigerator, and both they and the People's Kitchen stock the refrigerator and the pantry.
Okay.
So we get food from a lot of different sources. You kind of asked if we got food rescue from caterers or from the convention center. And I explained that because we're such a small operation, we don't have the infrastructure to rescue that type of food. And
Okay.
also, what you talked about is sometimes people are leery of giving you that food.
Right.
Though
Yep.
I've worked in restaurants and I've worked in food takeout stores where we did things like that, where with leftover food, we would portion it and freeze it and give it to other organizations that serve people in need.
Gotcha. Well, and I'm hoping to have somebody on the show to talk about the Food Donation Improvement Act, which does protect us from that, but it still does need to be time and temperature controlled, like you're
Yes,
talking
exactly.
about. Exactly. Because we don't want to just take the food and put it on the ground outside of your place and expect to serve that, right? No. It is. So the whole on your website, I kind of want to go backwards a little bit here too. On the front of your
Yes.
website, it says the People's Kitchen uses food to empower, transform, and heal community through free, nutritious meals, gardening, and education. And also the word sovereignty pops up in there as well. So can you? So everything that you make is free. So you're going 100% by grants and donations, right?
Yes.
And then you have, I think, what, 5 board members, and everything else is volunteer.
Okay, so actually, currently we have 8 board members.
Okay.
The 5 people who are on the executive committee.
Gotcha.
3 of us were, original board members, and then we had some people join us. And so we don't have a program director at the moment. So the executive board has been acting as the administrative arm of the organization. Because that's the other thing. It's like, it is very not easy, but it is much easier to get people to give you money for programs. It's very hard to get people to give you money for infrastructure or for salaries. So that means that you have to be able to raise money for the salary in order to pay somebody to do that full time. And so the board acts as the administrative arm, and we have an accountant. So, so that we can help people, without falling afoul of the federal government.
Right. Yeah, we don't want that to happen.
So when we talk about, there are so many things attached to food insecurity. I mean, the first one is you can't do anything if you're hungry. If you're hungry, you can't think about anything but the fact that you're hungry. You might be able to think about where can I get food, but it's not always apparent where you can get food. And the area that we service in South Philadelphia really encompasses a myriad of populations. There are immigrants from South America, there are immigrants from Asia, there are people who have lived in the community for years, but they have jobs that don't pay enough to support a family. Because one of the people said, sometimes people just take what I think it's too much food. And I said, well, you're just assuming that everybody has that little nuclear family. So it's a mother and father to maybe 3 kids. I said, but there are households where people have 6, 8, 10 kids. I said, and do we want to be in the business of policing that?
Right.
We have tried to gather some statistics. So we had we get interns from some of the colleges, and we have one now, and he's working on a way to gather some statistics, which is what grants and foundations love when you're asking them for money. But it's kind of hard to gather when you're not actually gathering data, that kind of data. It's like, we can tell you how many meals we put out. We can tell you if all the meals leave. We can tell you how much food we got donated and how much food left. But we can't actually say we served we served 150 meals, and 50 of them went to children and 50 of them went to women, and
Right.
or the age range. That's the other thing. So we get people with families, but we get people. One of the other big pockets of poverty are seniors, because and it's not that they didn't work, and it's not that they don't get Social Security, but Social Security, unless you had a very high-paying job, doesn't pay you a lot, and
Right.
your Social Security could literally be what your rent is.
Right.
And so
Right.
that's kind of what we're looking at. We're looking at to have food for these people, so they feel like they can go out into the world and source other things. I talked earlier about, so at the beginning, because nobody was working and because all of these restaurants were closed, we had a large pool of workers. We had a large pool of volunteers. We now hire contractors to run the kitchen on a particular day. That's the chef who's in charge of the meal. We have a kitchen manager who keeps track of the other things.
Okay.
And one of the things that happened is that when the when everybody else went back to work, we still had to find people to cook. And so one of the things that we did is we formed partnerships with like-minded organizations. So there are a couple in Philadelphia. One is called Food Not Bombs. And so that's kind of their approach. It's right there in their name. They're saying what should we be doing? And what we should be doing is making food, not making bombs. And the other one is called Punk for Lunch. And they have the slightly younger demographic working in the kitchen. And then we also have act as an incubator for Masa Cooperativa, which is primarily women-owned and women-run organization. And I say that one of the reasons we're invested in this organization is because women are the people who lift children out of poverty. It's like, it is, if the mother's poor, the child's poor. The mother could be, and so that when you give these women the opportunity to invest in themselves and to make money for themselves, that will circle back so that their children have better lives.
Wow. So they come and work in the kitchen.
So they have the kitchen one day a week, and they actually grind and make their own masa. And then they make tortillas that they sometimes sell in front of the kitchen, and then also at Head House, which is a farmer's market in Philadelphia.
Okay. All right. Well, and that's very powerful, because you, in so many ways, because again, you said at the very beginning, I'm like, if you don't have food, you don't have much else, right? Because you need food to sustain yourself, and you need food to feed your families. So it's a multifaceted conversation in getting this done. And then I think even with partnering with those other organizations, you add so much more value to the community in general across, because you're cross-reaching different markets.
Yeah, I truly believe that. It's sort of like, you can't work in a silo, but you also have to allow some grace. It's like, everybody can't do everything. Everybody doesn't have the same skill set, but almost, I've watched my sister, teach people who, for the most part, we have one sister, we say, what do you do for dinner? And it's like,
how many sisters do you two have?
I have 4 sisters.
Okay.
I have 4 sisters, and like I said, sometimes they get dragooned into doing things. One sister works for a food access program for a small nonprofit called St. Christopher's Hospital for Children, and they recently closed their office, and I garnered some stuff from the office that they were getting rid of for the People's Kitchen. So then I had to get a sister to come pick it up and drive it down to the People's Kitchen. So yeah, and then there were we got some help from other people moving stuff, but it is, so it's in lots of ways how we get our food and how we get
Mhm.
other things we need, like computers and desks and materials and chairs, and is that we tap other organizations that are closing, and lots of times people will give us things because they're closing.
Right.
We're not always able to take advantage of those opportunities because we run into the same problem that I said we want to run into rescuing food, which is, do we have somebody available? Do we have somebody who can move it? Do we have a big enough truck to move it in?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So on that note, because I mean, the food donation improvement does allow for charging for the, I have to, I have to get my words right here, charging for the actual cost of like the transportation, not selling it for, above fee, not to make a profit, but for selling it for the actual cost. And I guess that's clarification on, is the grocery store get that fee, or do you get that fee? How does that work? Yeah. Does
Well,
it make
so yeah, I don't know. It is actually, once you mentioned it to me, one of those things I thought we could explore.
Mm-hmm.
So with the grocery stores, some of the stores actually deliver the food to us, and some
Okay.
of them we pick it up from. It just depends
Okay.
on the store. Sometimes it just depends on the day. Like for the most part, the grocery store delivers the food. But like with anything else, if enough people don't come to work,
Right.
it makes it harder for them to do.
Right.
Or if they have something that they know is particularly perishable, then they want to be sure there's somebody there to receive it. So we don't have the people left food outside.
Right. Yeah. And that I think that's part of one of the biggest problems with a lot of organizations that need the food to feed the people that they're feeding, is that getting the food from people, right? And the staffing. And I think that's part of what the Food Donation Improvement Act is trying to help do, is to help you rescue that food. And we'll look into it more on when we're off air, but because it does take gas, it does take a car, it does take people, to get that done. Based on what you've done in these last 4 years, how have you seen, what has been the significance to the community that you support and that the restaurant is in? Have you seen people prosper from it, or?
It is funny because what you tend to see are the people still in need. But every once in a while, you'll have somebody come up and tell you of, what that did for them, that,
Mhm.
they got food when they really needed it. It helped them. We sometimes get people who used to get food who volunteer in the kitchen.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah. One of the things that we kind of touched on when we talked earlier is what would I like to see from people in the community? And Lord knows we're never turning down dollars. But I
Right.
think that you don't really appreciate what the people in need and what the organization does if you don't spend a little time in the kitchen. And that's what you have to, and that's the thing you have to convince people of. You don't have to be a master chef. You don't have to be an extraordinary cook. If you've ever worked in a food business, one of the first things they teach you is production. And even when I was a little kid, my father would say, if you have to do something, it's still assembly line, even if you're the only person on the assembly line.
Oh,
And
that's so true.
he says, so you should, if you got to cut up
Mhm.
onions, you should cut up all your onions, not just cut up enough for the one thing. You cut up enough for the 10 things.
Right.
So yeah.
And
And,
and,
and this is
and that's a good point.
Yeah, and people never think about it. It's like you think about the way that you learn to cook, not about the way you have to cook where you're cooking for 100 people.
Right. Right.
And
Because whether it's 10 or 100, it's the same steps.
yeah, and you kind of want to do those steps that will make it the quickest way for you get to your final projects.
Right.
And then, one of the things that we try to do is when we make food, is make food that kind of reflects the different cultures that exist in that neighborhood. So,
Okay.
foods with Asian accents and South African accents. And like I said, it was originally the Italian market. And even at home, my sister Valerie and I had a restaurant. It was called Geechee Girl. And she was the chef at the restaurant. But when we were home, one of us would take out food. And if the other one got home first, they would cook. And it would be the same food. And I would come home and, she would have made some Asian accented dish where I was just planning to put a rub on it and stick it in the oven. It's like, it's like it would be the same food, but we would look at it and see totally different things. And that's what we try to do when we make food at the kitchen is not fall into the habit of making food that's significant to you, but to always try to make food that's significant to the wider community.
Well, yeah, because you may be eating it, but it's really about the people that you're feeding, not you.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
What challenges have you had over the course of the 4 years? The biggest, you've kind of talked about getting new equipment in from other companies that are closing, et cetera. But what are your biggest challenges, on a daily basis? Is it collecting food from those grocery stores, or have you built a relationship with them enough that they automatically do that?
I think we have a good enough relationship with them that we get food like that. There are also other avenues through which we get food at Share, the food distribution center in Philadelphia. They literally have a place where they have overage where you can go up and pick up food, because they I'm talking about working in a restaurant. When you work in a restaurant, you try to keep your margin as tight as possible, and you try not to order food that you can't use. Well, right. The food distribution center has that same problem, but on a much larger scale. And some weeks you think you might, need, 400 tons of bananas, and what you only needed was 20 tons of bananas. And we're not the only people that benefit from that. Probably almost all of the food rescue operations in Philadelphia benefit from that. But it is certainly a way to it's not just a way to feed people, it's a way to make sure that food is used and we're not contributing to food waste. It is a sad thing where we're throwing away food and people are going hungry. Mm-hmm. And so so we have gotten good partners in helping us rescue that food.
That's a really, really good point. And I wish there were venues that didn't believe, we're going to get sued for donating this food or whatever. If it's still good, if it's still time and temperature controlled, then we should be feeding our communities.
Yes, we should be feeding our communities. We people talk about what a wealthy nation this is, and still there are so many inequities. And I think, the fact that you don't have food or housing or, is way up there. It's funny. I should memorize this woman's name. I haven't, but there was an obituary in the Times earlier this week for a woman who started the English as a second language, and she started it as a reading program. She read something where she thought there were people in other countries who didn't know how to read, and then a census came out and she realized there were people where she lived that didn't know how to read, and she literally started it in her basement, and then she expanded it to include she got people from churches and people from teachers. She got a whole cadre of people and she started to teach people how to read, and then the organization grew and it merged and became another organization, and it's just amazing. She was 107 when she died.
Wow.
So yeah. So so sometimes you feel as if as one person you can't do anything,
Mm-hmm.
but anything you do helps. You know, any
Oh.
contribution you're willing to make, whether it's time or money, or sometimes it's an idea. You know, just because we have a way of doing things does not necessarily mean it's the best way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and sometimes you have to adjust what you do and how you do it because you can better serve your population.
Right. There's so many things in that I want to break down. And my friend Katie just looked it up. Lynn Hygiene. Hygienian. Oh no, that was 8. She's 82 though. That's not.
Yeah, but that's under the.
Anyways, we'll look up that name.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because she said she was 107 when she died.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I was just telling somebody, you think that's a good age until you hit 106.
Right, exactly. Like there's a bunch of people who were like the oldest people in the world that are just recently dying and they're that age. I'm like, holy moly. How, you know, we've talked about this at the very, very beginning, but I want to just ask this question very poignantly.
Here she is.
Ruth Johnson Cole.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Champion of literacy. How does food play in empowering and transforming the communities, especially during the crisis?
Oh, I think it did two things. It gave people a space in which they could get food. It gave them a space, a sense of community, a sense of being tied to the other people. So sometimes when you're food insecure, or anything, or if you're housing insecure, you feel like you're alone. You feel like there's nobody who understands what you're going through. You feel like people think you must have done something wrong to be in that situation. And when you meet other people who face those same challenges, you realize that that circumstances can shape what happened to you. Just it's not all dependent on your choices. I mean, the pandemic, in addition to highlighting how food insecure people in the United States are, because you know this is not a problem that is only exists in Philadelphia. It exists across the country. It exists in cities. It exists in small towns. It exists in rural areas. And what we've become, I think, in lots of ways, such a consumptive society that we live that paycheck to paycheck. And people who are more income secure don't realize that we've created this system where people barely make enough to pay their bills. And in some instances, they can't pay their bills. And I think when you're not alone, when you see other people, then you start thinking about what things you can do to change that. And one of those things is that when the people volunteer in the kitchen, or when this world started opening up again, using the contacts that the people who worked in the kitchen had to help these people find work. Of course, there was the other problem we ran into is because a lot of them were undocumented.
Gotcha.
And that causes, you know, challenges. We have so many issues around immigration. It's amazing. And one of the ones that I'm always telling people is that until they made it so hard to cross the border from Mexico to the United States, people didn't come and stay. They used to come, go home, and they might come back. but they didn't come. But now they're afraid to leave because they can't get back in.
Mm-hmm.
So I, Lord knows I don't have the answer, but I do think that I was just talking to I think we need to give people a little more grace.
Mm-hmm.
I think almost on every level we don't give them grace if they're laboring in hardship. Oops, I just touched something. Can you still see me? Because I lost you.
Yep. Nope, you're here.
Okay, so I don't know where I am then. Okay. Well, I'll just talk. So yeah, so when we're talking about that, it's sort of like the gardens. At the gardens, we have a group working there who used to garden in a plot in South Philadelphia, and they grow food that is reflective of their culture. So like
Mm-hmm.
squash and wintermelon and eggplants and special herbs, and that's the other thing you're trying to give people. You're trying to kind of cement their sense of self and home. And I think that's empowering. That
Right.
I think in lots of ways, it used to be that people had to kind of give up their culture if they were in the United States.
Right.
Everybody spoke English. Everybody was. I had to learn the food that was served here and not the food that they had in their country of origin.
Well, and let's see, pin that comment. But one of your friends that make the corn, how do you say it? Mohia Masala? Did I say that right?
I don't. Yeah.
No. Yeah.
I probably don't call them that, so it's like.
Well,
Yeah,
no. What's that organization that you work with that comes and does the?
Oh, the Masa Cooperativa.
Okay, maybe that's not the same group. Okay.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
they just posted on here. Yes, we need to be more empathetic to all humans. So I need to make sure it's the same group that you were talking about earlier. But anyways,
Yeah.
Mohi Masala is. Thank you very much. They put it in Instagram for me to know how to say it. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. But one of the things somebody said to me on a podcast, and there's two podcasts from previous things, is one created a kitchen for people, because when they come over, the only thing that they know how to do is show you their food, right? People share their food with each other, right? And so they gave them a kitchen so that the immigrants from wherever they were could actually make the dishes of their native country that they knew how to make, right? And so it gave them that space, and that organization gave them the empathy to learn and teach that. But I forgot my other point too. So it's amazing that you're allowing that to happen, right? And we need to understand their cultures and understand who they are while we're still making food for them. I hope that made all sense.
Yeah, it does make sense because it is very easy to get focused on the task and forget the people. It harks back to what I was talking about earlier, when you want everybody to have a chance at the food, but do you want to police it to the point that you make people feel self-conscious about taking it? And that's not what you want to do. You want everybody to feel as if they're worthy of that food.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
They just said shared food is love. And so actually they're an Indian spice blend company based in Philly. You guys need to chat.
Okay, we certainly will.
Yeah, because you have to, sitting down and breaking bread with somebody, it is such an empowering and heart-filled opportunity to make a new friend, break down barriers. And I think there was a story recently that I read about people, it was two people from the opposite sides of the current war, sitting down and having a conversation with each other over food. Right. And
Yes.
it didn't impact their, they got to share their own perspectives of the war, but they didn't walk away like beating each other up. Right. They walked away with this conversation that they had in learning the other person's perspectives.
Yeah. It's like, it is very much that food is a connector, and it is an always interesting thing when you have food from other cultures and when you hear people talk about their food. And one of the things that I didn't mention in that is that last year and this year we participated in a community building exercise that was that involved other organizations that were in food rescue, and they had a big dinner where different chefs made or donated food, so people would get a chance to see the different things. And yes, it's very important to share food. It's very important to talk to people about the food. And I will confess that sometimes when I'm down there trying to do paperwork and people knock on the door, it's like the door is shut because I'm trying to work. but and then they say, well, do you have any food? And I say, well, let me check, because that's not really what I do, and sometimes that we have one day where we don't actually have anybody cooking, but the people who cooked the day before or early in the week try to make extra meals so we can just put them out. And that's a challenge. Like when it's really hot, then you want to make food that's not is cold, but when it's really cold, it's more of a challenge because you really want to put out hot meals.
Right. Exactly.
You want the meals to meet the season. And that's actually one of the things that we get. Lots of times we get produce and fruit and things that are very seasonal.
Right. Well, and which is more nutrient dense, hopefully, than getting it from somewhere else in the world. Right.
Yes.
And you're supporting that local community too.
Yeah. It's like, I think sometimes we forget how interconnected we all are. That no matter where you fall on that social, economic, educational spectrum, the things you want to be able to feed your family. You want to be able to live in peace. You want to be able to, have some place to live. It's like, and you want a community around you that embodies those values.
That's very true. Very, very true. Okay. 2 final questions for you.
Okay.
Looking ahead, what is the People's Kitchen's goal, and how can people support you and get involved to support the mission?
Okay, so I've said it earlier, there are 2 things. One is we're never turning away volunteers, and we're certainly never turning away dollars. And if you have some ideas or you're interested in becoming more involved, kind of what we're trying to do right now is set up a better infrastructure for the People's Kitchen so that we can have advisory boards and advisory committees, because I think, the many hands, less work kind of thing. And also, so the vision doesn't change, but how you implement the vision changes, because you have to adjust it to what's available and what the times are like, and where the resources are. So that's kind of where we are. It's one of the reasons why we've been trying to grow our board. And it's one of the reasons we're always looking for people with a particular skill set. So, right now we have our board consists of the one of the founders who's very involved with the community farms, Ben Miller. and
Mhm.
my sister, who is a chef and a food justice advocate,
Mhm.
April McGregor, who is also someone we know from Les Dames, who's food. She does canning and preserving, and she kind of, when we have overages, like things that we can't cook right away, she takes care of turning that into something that we can have in our pantry and like use later
Awesome.
in the year. Yeah.
Right.
It is very, we have Pete, who's an artist and had been involved in the food business, and does a lot of our grant writing. And but as we grow, as we look to refine our vision, because we're about to have a board retreat. We've been trying to do this for a while. Because I know you found this with Les Dames. I found this with Les Dames too. It's like you kind of get stuck in the minutia of the work and not the vision for the organization.
Mhm.
And that's an important thing. That's also the kind of thing that when you're going to funders, they want to know. They're
Right.
like, I'm giving you this money, but what happens when this money runs out? Are you looking for
Mhm.
somebody else to give you money, or are you looking for, like, one of the things we're trying to do is come up with a sustaining donor campaign that'll cover our fixed costs. So the
Right.
things like rent, electricity, gas, water, those things are
Mhm.
never going away.
Right.
And like I said, funders don't want to pay for that. So,
Yeah.
so that's that's
Okay.
one of the things.
Yeah. No, that's such an important thing to think about, because just like I said, collecting the food, picking up the food, that takes people to go get it. It takes cars, but so does keeping the doors open. It takes the electricity, the water, the knives,
Yes.
the pots and pans, etc. Yeah. It takes all of that to make sure you stay afloat and continue to do what you're doing. All right. So my last question, which is what I ask everybody, and I liked your answer when I asked you, previously, but what does a safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experience look like or feel like to you?
So it is very much, I think, when you kind of you have to ask people about what they're looking for, and you have to listen to the answer, because sometimes, and I do it, I know I do it a lot, and my friend complains about it. It's like you're trying to be so helpful that you're jumping to the answer,
Mm-hmm.
and so you're not actually hearing what people say. I One of the other things I think you asked about is had I ever had a bad food experience, and I eat out a lot, and my, depending on who you're talking to that day, I might be perceived as picky, but I do tell people that I'm allergic to things, but some things I don't tell people I'm allergic to, because like there's this elaborate description of the food, and then I get it and it's got strawberries in it, and I'm allergic to strawberries, and I've had a reaction. I've had not had an anaphylactic shock reaction, but it
Thankfully.
that's
Yeah.
that thankfully, but that's the kind of thing you have to listen to when people tell you. We had someone come into the restaurant when we had it and order shrimp and grits, and then say to me she was allergic to shrimp. It's like, oh, you can't have this. It's like, now if she had kept that to herself, but when you tell me that, I can't serve you food like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I have another sister who has a whole series of food challenges. And I said two things to her. She said she couldn't eat out. I said, no, you have to read the menu differently. And it is, and that's kind of what it is. It's like, so she reads the menu the way they give it to her. So she can't have pasta, or she can't have flour pasta, wheat pasta.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's rice or potatoes on the menu, that's generally an easy substitution.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to say, I'm not the crazy, because sometimes you think it's just a crazy person who wants to rewrite the entire menu. You say,
Right.
I'd really like to have this, but I can't have pasta. And usually people are accommodating. And so so that when we make food at the kitchen, for example, lots of times we try to make food that can be served both as a vegetarian or vegan dish, that we could put some meat or fish or shrimp, something, some protein, some other type of protein on. So
Mhm.
people don't feel like we're only catering to the vegetarians, and the vegetarians don't feel like we're never having food for them.
Right. That is a real thing. That is a
Yes.
real thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, I absolutely love what you're doing, and I love with the People's Kitchen, and I need to come up in Philly and work with you in the kitchen one day, because I do agree with you that once you get in that kitchen, instead of just handing dollars over, if you get in there and you experience what the meaning behind making the food is, and then serving it as well,
Yeah.
it adds a whole nother level.
Yeah, I believe so. And I believe that, you're having these conversations also helps with opening up that space.
Right. Yeah. Well, Alethea, thank you very much for
You're
being
very
here.
welcome. And be sure to let me know when you have the person talking on about the Food Donation Protection Act, because
I will.
I really want to hear that, because
Okay. I will. And I'm going to put a link in here too under comments with the an article on it, which is from the Center for Health Law and Policy Innovation at Harvard Law School.
okay.
So I just put that link in there for everybody to look at. But yeah, I'm going to talk about that. And there's been a lot of conversations around food waste in general. And I know the White House just put out a national strategy for reducing food waste, food loss, and waste and recycling organics. That came out in June. So I want to have a conversation on that too.
That's
So
interesting. You know what, you said that, and it made me think of something else, which is not exactly about, it is about food insecurity. And one of the really big problems we have in the food insecurity space is the food stamp program doesn't allow people to use it to buy hot food.
Oh,
And
okay.
yes, and the assumption attached to that is that you have a kitchen and
Right.
some place to heat food. So I could buy a cooked chicken, but I can't buy it hot. I have to buy it cold. Yes. And well, part of it is
You
it's
couldn't buy
because
a rotisserie chicken at the grocery store that just came out of the oven?
you can't buy a rotisserie chicken at the grocery store that just came out of the oven. Now, here's the thing. They both cost the same amount of money.
Right.
And it is really, you will find cashiers who will say, well, I didn't know it was hot, and just ring it up. The same. But yeah, but the sister who works with the foundation says that it's because the food stamp program is a agricultural department program, and it was made to help the farmers, not to help the starving people.
Right. Yep. And I was just actually listening to a podcast episode from Food Tank about that, and because the food bill, the farm bill is up for renewal, and there's a lot of things that are being addressed in the farm bill, which
That would be
impacts,
great.
yeah, which impacts that. And actually, I have to look it up, but he said that they wanted the current House version of it is taking $30 billion out of that program.
Oh my God.
Right, which is the opposite of what we want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the opposite of what we want to do. We want to put more money in there, right? And feed people, not build bums, or however you said that, right?
Yeah.
Let me, because I was just listening to it in the car yesterday, and it was a great interview that she had. I'll find it and put it in the chat for everybody after we're done,
Okay.
because I thought it was a really good conversation. Food Tank. I'll find it anyway. Yeah, I'll find it. because it does talk about that. So we do need to, when you're voting for people and you're looking at stuff, and if you're concerned about feeding people, you need to be paying attention to what the Farm Bill says. And if it goes through this time, or if it's going to get pushed off to the next one, because we have 70 days until, or something like that.
Yeah, it's
The
like
election. Yeah.
It's that's going to be interesting.
Exactly. All right, my friend.
Thank
Go ahead.
you. I was just going to say the Dom had planned something for the 10th, but we're moving it because the debate is here in Philadelphia at the Constitution Center.
Oh.
And they have not. I guess you have to murder somebody to get a ticket, because they haven't even mentioned a lottery for tickets.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, that would be interesting to watch for sure. So in person, especially. All right. Well, I put up here how to get a hold of you. This is their Instagram feed, People's Kitchen Philly.
Yes.
And you can get a hold of Alethia. And then actually here is their website as well. So if you're in Philly, and please reach out to them and go spend some time in the kitchen with them. Chef Anzer and Silver Lining Singers, and I'm going to say this right, Moji Masala. Thank you for joining on Instagram, Realtor Kashima as well. I really appreciate you being here. And everybody stay safe and eat well until next time. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.